This is the iPhone 17 Pro, and if you've ever wanted to know what a full-on Android enthusiast thinks of this phone, then this is the video for you. Now, for context, I don't choose to be an Android enthusiast because I have anything against iPhones or because I don't like them. In fact, the opposite is actually true. It mainly just comes down to the fact that I tend to prefer the way that Android does things from a software perspective. And so throughout the year, my SIM card primarily lives in Android phones, even when I'm not reviewing them, but it's become a yearly tradition now where when the newest iPhones are released, I always pick one up, I take my SIM card out of whatever Android phone that I was using at the time, and then I put it into the iPhone for at least a month, and then I review it. And well, today's the day that I'm finally reviewing the iPhone 17 Pro. So let's begin. Okay, starting with this phone's design, and after quite a few iterative years from really the iPhone 12 all the way to last year's iPhone 16 series, this year we got our first notable design change with the Pro lineup. Gone is the glass and titanium combo. Now we've got an all aluminium body with this new camera visor design and a new two-tone finish on the back thanks to this large cutout for this glass section, which has been added to allow for wireless charging. And from a visual standpoint, I actually really dig it. Like, I get that it's not as clean looking as past iPhones, but man, you can't deny that this doesn't have way more character, and for that, I love it. It also feels fantastic in the hand, although definitely not quite as premium as the iPhone 15 Pro and 16 Pro before it, so that's just something to keep in mind. And look, whilst I love how bold this cosmic orange color is, I get that it's absolutely not for everyone, and I actually think that I prefer the silver. But to be fair, if you're just gonna put it in a case like this new tank case from channel sponsor dbrand, then the color that you choose is pretty irrelevant. There are only two things that I don't love about the design. Firstly, if Apple are gonna go with this camera plateau style design on the back here, couldn't they have at least leveled it out so that the phone had no side-to-side wobble when using it flat on a table? Like, it's pretty much just as wobbly as the iPhone 16 Pro last year, which is pretty disappointing. And secondly, the aluminium is actually way more susceptible to damage if you drop the thing compared to the titanium and glass combo found on the iPhone 15 and 16 Pro. Luckily, both of these issues can be addressed if you use a case, and again, highly recommend the options offered by dbrand. This brand new tank case in particular is definitely worth checking out if you're not super careful with your phone because it offers really rugged protection and super strong magnets, and thankfully I've managed to keep my iPhone 17 Pro in pristine condition as a result. But yeah, I've seen some super alarming images of various iPhone 17 Pros in the wild getting super dinged up, so just keep that in mind. Just one other note that I wanted to mention, which is that Apple claimed that they switched to aluminium for better thermal management, but here's the thing, this phone has gotten noticeably warm to the touch in day-to-day use compared to any past iPhone that I've ever used. Now, I'm positive that part of that is related to software issues and maybe in fringe scenarios where perhaps if you were recording videos or playing high-intensive games for a long period of time in blazingly hot weather, then maybe the 17 Pro would outperform past iPhones, but I haven't found myself in any of those sorts of scenarios. It's more just been when I've had longer than average doom scrolling sessions or even just when the phone has been charging, it's honestly gotten proper warm to the touch. Now, there is an argument to be made that that's actually a sign of better thermals because the heat is getting taken away from the internal components of the phone and therefore getting transferred to the exterior metal body. But I don't really notice much of an improvement in regards to performance compared to past iPhones. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd kind of love to see Apple revert to glass and titanium again for their next lineup because, as I said, it feels so much nicer in the hand. It seems to offer better protection, plus it removes the need for this glass cutout section on the back. The display has also had a couple of really nice quality of life improvements this year too. So it's now a little brighter than before, which is great, and it now has an anti-reflective coating, which is a really nice touch. I will say it's definitely a much more subtle anti-reflective coating compared to what Samsung uses on its Ultra phones, but I reckon the fact that Apple have added it not only to their Pro phones, but to every phone in the 17 lineup this year, hopefully that'll result in other manufacturers doing the same going forward, which would be amazing for the consumer. Oh, and by the way, whilst the display is again stronger than past iPhones, which I love that Apple keeps improving upon this each year, but if you want to keep it in actual proper pristine condition, then I highly recommend still picking up a screen protector, and dbrand's Prism 2.0 screen protectors are easily one of the best options that you can get because they're dead easy to install. They're also now scratch proof. They also feature an oleophobic coating, meaning fingerprint marks are a non-issue, and you can actually get a hefty 42% discount by bundling it with one of their cases if you use my link, dbrand.com/Sam Beckman. Either way, it's yet again another great display on the iPhone 17 Pro, right up there with the best that you can get. Okay, then we have the battery life, and I've got to say, it's actually been a little hit and miss for me. Now, for reference, I have an international model with a SIM card tray, meaning the battery is slightly smaller than the eSIM only version, but even with that being the case, it is still a noticeably larger battery compared to what we had in the iPhone 16 Pro. In real world use though, it's been a slightly underwhelming experience. Don't get me wrong, I've had several days of light use where the phone was sitting around or even above 50% at the end of the day, which is fantastic. But then there have also been days with much heavier use where it's actually died well before the end of the day. So a little inconsistent there, and I feel like it has actually gotten a little bit better with the past couple of updates, but it's still not nearly as reliable an experience as what I had with the 16 Pro last year. And I reckon the biggest culprit for that is actually iOS 26. And look, I was initially going to unpack all of my thoughts on iOS 26 on the iPhone 17 Pro in this video, but as has happened in so many of my phone reviews this year, it ended up becoming this long-winded rant and gave the video this overall negative vibe that I didn't feel was appropriate given how I actually feel about this phone. So just recently, I posted a completely separate, self-contained video titled Everything Wrong with iOS 26. So I'll link that in the cards if you want the full deep dive on what I think needs to be improved with this version of iOS. But the long and short of it is this. Whilst iOS 26 is visually the best version of iOS hands down, like it genuinely looks stunning in so many different areas, it's also been one of the least fluid and most buggy versions of iOS that I've ever used. And in fact, it was actually so off-putting with the stable update that I actually decided to re-enable developer updates. And I will say the bugs have been gradually getting sorted out with each and every update since. So that is promising, but this only further supports my thesis, which is that iOS 26 definitely needed a little more time in the oven. And so finally, we come to the cameras. And there are three factors about the cameras that I've loved with the iPhone 17 Pro in particular. First and foremost, it's the upgraded selfie camera, which to me is honestly one of the best and most exciting features that any smartphone maker has added to a phone in a long, long time, definitely at least in the camera department. And yes, the ability to shoot ultra-wide selfies is hugely appreciated in and of itself, but the real game changer is that we can now shoot landscape videos whilst holding the phone in a portrait orientation. I cannot tell you how incredible this feature is, and if you're someone who shoots lots of horizontal selfie videos in particular, well, this feature makes capturing them infinitely easier, and it's a feature that I hope every single Android phone copies in the next year or so. The only thing that I wish was that it worked on the rear cameras too, because that would be seriously amazing. Then we've got the upgraded telephoto lens. So it's now a 48 megapixel shooter to match the main and ultra wide lenses, but Apple also switched it to a 4x zoom rather than the 5x that we had on last year's 16 Pro and the 3x that we had prior. And I reckon 4x is a pretty happy medium. It just means that what was already a pretty solid and well-rounded camera configuration is now even more consistently great. The only downside is that the telephoto lens has a pretty long minimum focusing distance, which does make things a little limiting for my liking. For example, a lot of Android phones these days have actually switched away from the ultra-wide lens being the macro shooter, like the iPhone 17 Pros is, to now the telephoto lenses being the macro shooters. And honestly, it makes shooting macro shots so much easier given that you don't need to be literally on top of the thing that you're taking a photo of to get it in focus, which therefore means you're not accidentally blocking light. And it means the final images just end up looking way more polished thanks to the field of view being much more compressed and much more natural looking. It's mainly just a shame that Apple didn't consider this, given they actually changed the hardware of the telephoto lens on the 17 Pro lineup. Just would have made sense to kill two birds with one stone, in my opinion. Apart from that though, the telephoto lens has been otherwise great. But then the third factor that I've loved, especially coming from the Android world, is just how reliable the camera shooting experience has been. I'll speak about this in just about every iPhone review that I make, and that's because it's the one area that Android just can't seem to catch up on. Now, to be fair, there are some manufacturers that have gotten close in some areas, but when you put it all together, like in terms of being able to freeze motion or how quickly the app responds when you tap the shutter button, to how seamless the lens switching is when shooting videos, to even just how fast photos and videos are processed after the fact, the iPhone 17 Pro just simply cannot be beat. But here's where my head's at regarding how the iPhone 17 Pro stacks up compared to Android phones available at a similar price point. My takeaway is that from a hardware perspective, it's easily the most well-rounded device that you can get for the money. Well, all except one, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But there's just no area with this phone where it feels like it's lacking, and that just never quite seems to be the case on the Android side of things. Like Pixel phones, for example, they're really great in a lot of areas, and they also now support Qi 2 magnetic charging, but they struggle when it comes to performance. That's also pretty true of Nothing phones, and they also struggle when it comes to camera output. Even Samsung's S25 and S25 Plus, they're both really solid options, but I think most would agree that they don't have an outstanding set of flagship cameras. And I'm even including the harder to get phones too, like those from OnePlus or Oppo or Xiaomi, for example. All of these companies are making some really fantastic phones, but they've all got a bunch of little software or performance quirks that make them just that little less desirable. Whereas with the iPhone 17 Pro, it just doesn't really have a weak spot. Now, as I said, there is one Android phone that I do think offers slightly better value for money, which is the Galaxy S25 Ultra, but that's probably a conversation for another day, and so all I'll say is this. The iPhone 17 Pro is a great phone, and if you're not like me and you prefer iOS over Android, then you're absolutely going to love it. Aside from that, let me know what you think of the iPhone 17 lineup down in the comments, because I'm keen to hear your thoughts, and keep an eye out on the channel because my iOS 26 customization guide is finally going live next week. But that's it. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you later.